So here we are. Super thrilled to be with you. And I would just introduce myself a little bit. Hi, Anne. Thank you very much. Always good to hear from you. This is a Q&A session. So the idea is Q and hopefully some good A's. So I would encourage you to use the chat to please ask questions. And I would also appreciate a little bit of patience. I'm a one-man show here with the technology, obviously, as I've already demonstrated. And I'll do my best as I go through. I've got a stack of questions that I will attempt to get through, and we'll do our best. But just quickly, introduction of me, for those of you who don't know me. My name is Jonathan Cullen. I spent 18 years at Pfizer, leading teams in France, Canada, Brazil, rest of South America, Central America, Caribbean, Mexico, 4 languages, 5 time zones, more reorgs than I can count, just like many of you. I was very, very fortunate to be named Canadian General Counsel of the Year at some point. And as an aside, my fun aside is I collaborated with my favorite author, Greg McEwen, on his second book. His first one, highly recommended, Essentialism. His second book called Effortless, Make It Easier to Do What Matters Most. And, plug for him, highly recommend that. Now, a big shift for me. I work with law firms, organizations, lawyers. I help them make the transition from technical expert to genuinely strategic, going from lawyer to leader. So that's what I hope to help you with. And that sort of frames, I think, some of my answers that you'll see from the questions that I've already received. All right, so I'm gonna turn this off. We've got our chat, and I will turn off the bottom, clean that up. And the way I'll do it is, I don't have any slides. That was a promise I made. I'm sticking to the promise. But what I'll do is make sure to put on the screen the questions that I'm reading so that you have them as well. And more importantly, though, I would encourage, finagle questions live from you. I'm more than happy to answer them. I will prioritize live questions. That's to make it a little bit more interactive. But I do have a stack of questions ready to go. And I would say, I think probably more questions than I'm going to be able to get to. So my compromise is, no problem, thank you. My compromise is, what I'm going to attempt to do after the session for the questions that I didn't get to, I'm going to write them up in my blog with the answers that I think might make sense. I won't have the luxury of your responses and all of that, but I didn't want to not get to all the questions. So that'll be there. There's a QR code on the screen if you want to get access to the blog. And if it disappears, you didn't get it, feel free to contact me. And also my website is jonathancullencoaching.com. All right. So let's see. I'll encourage you again, questions in the Q&A. And if not, I'm going to start right off with the ones that I've received in advance. All right. So I began with this one on purpose and for a reason, because it's one, of course, that I'm sure many of you have heard and I've heard repeatedly. I'm doing everything right, great reviews, long hours. I don't know where the long hours fits into doing things right, but no complaints. So why does it feel like my career is moving sideways instead of up? And I think this is the thing I hear constantly, either in this form or another. So again, I'd welcome, many of you have experience with this, but I would welcome your thoughts, and here's mine. So first of all, welcome to the grind. Nobody gets promoted or into interesting roles or positions or projects because their memos were flawless. That's just not how it works. So this is, part of why I want to start helping lawyers in a new capacity is this question. Technical excellence is the entry fee. It's not the winning ticket. It gets you in the room. It doesn't get you necessarily to the head of the table. So the shift that you want to look for, and for all the non-lawyers on the call, it's not much different. The shift that you want to look for is not to be looking to be rewarded for being right, for being technically correct. It's for being rewarded for being trusted. What I would call relentless patience. So when you're being patient, it's not just waiting your turn, the act of sort of like languishing. It's preparing yourself every single day so that when the opportunity finally meets the moment, you're ready. You're the only logical person for the event, for the project, but you're building towards it every day. So there's a difference between just being passive, waiting, and being patient. And lawyers are not necessarily known for being patient. We tend to be doers, action-oriented, advancing the ball, and being patient can sometimes feel like spinning your wheels. So I would keep that phrase in mind. Being relentlessly patient doesn't mean stagnating. So a good question to ask yourself is not necessarily, am I the best lawyer in the room? Especially if you work in-house, you're probably the only lawyer in the room, so congratulations. But you can ask yourself a different question: is, am I the most useful person in the room? Those are two different words. It's, you can put your lawyer hat on and address the legal issue, but you want to seek to be a useful colleague. And even if you're, outside counsel, you have to put the hat on of like, what is my client actually seeking here? And if you're doing that relentlessly and you're being patient with what the result is, good things will happen. So for each of these questions, I'm going to attempt to give a practical next step. And, my practical next step for you is, and for the person who asked this, or for anyone who's looking at the question thinking that's me, ask a senior person, this week, not the question, how am I doing? The generic question, which is difficult to answer. Ask, what would make you trust me with something bigger? So you're beginning with the trust component. That's what you're seeking. You want to gauge that. But if your metric is, I'm being trusted with more impactful files, better things, what do I have to do to increase that probability? And it's based on trust. All right. I'm just checking. All right. I'm just checking people who are able to get in or not. All right. So that's that question. I will do my best as I'm going through the pre-submitted questions to keep my eye on the chat for anything live. Again, I welcome your building on what I've said, comments, questions, corrections, additions, subtractions. That's absolutely welcome. I'm going to go to the next question, which made me laugh. Oh, excellent. I've got in the chat, my 2 cents, look for leadership opportunities in your company outside of simply practicing law. Yeah, chairing committees that contain both legal and business colleagues. Such a valuable comment. Thank you. Totally agree with that. It's going to make you more rounded. It's going to expand your sphere of thinking. It's going to, one of the challenges with any specialized profession, the law is no different. We tend to go deeper and deeper and deeper. Even if you're not a specialist, if you work in-house, you're a generalist, you do forget you are a specialist compared to the average person out there. And we tend to lose the interaction and learning from people in different professions. And as I mentioned, I spent almost 2 decades at Pfizer, and what a great opportunity to be in the room constantly with people who are better than me at so many other things. And I just absorb that like a sponge. So absolutely, completely great comment. And even I'll build on the comment and pull out a word from it: leadership. Like, yes, participate in things, but why not lead a committee about something that is supporting your organization's values and goals? And it'll also sort of like get you out of that complaining bubble about, I'm doing this and I'm not getting that. Well, try something completely different, enjoy it, So yes, thank you for that comment. All right, next pre-submitted question, and feel free, please, to interrupt me in the chat. I will pounce on that in a good way. I think I do good work, but I'm terrible at self-promotion. How do I get visibility without selling my soul? All right. So first of all, even in the question and the phrasing of the question, I'm terrible at self-promotion, and the word "I think" at the beginning, there's a lot in words, right? I think I do good work. I guarantee you this person knows they do good work, and they are right away cutting their kneecaps out with the words "I think." So I'll just also begin with, let's stop calling it self-promotion. That framing is definitely killing you. So there's a lot of ways to frame it. I'll propose one. Think of it as making your thinking available. Have a point of view. Invisibility is not humility. Trust me, it stalls your career. So, and the feeling the discomfort you're having is probably your ego not wanting to seem like you need attention. You're really in your head with this question. And one of my proposals, and there's many ways to attack this question, something I definitely learned working at this healthcare organization. Of course, primary purpose of a pharmaceutical organization is to deliver medicines that impacts patients' health, but also companies like this and many others, they're marketing machines, and I was definitely steeped in marketing, and there's something that you can pull out from that. Think about it as a marketing flow, a trust-based marketing flow. Start with awareness. Do people know you exist? So as a starting point, I mean, that seems obvious, but awareness in the market, people know what you do. Look at this event for me. I mean, I've changed careers recently, and most of you, if you did know me, you would know me in another capacity. For the many reasons for me to do this, first of all, I like it, but second of all, it does help change your view of what I'm doing. So awareness, then you move along the flow. If you consider yourself as a product or a service, what's next in that trust-based marketing flow is liking or affinity. That people don't tend to engage with things they dislike. And I would just put a plug in here for a book that I found highly relevant in my progression. It's called Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. And just to steep yourself a little bit in how other people think about why they like something. Are they willing to engage in it? Will they take more? That book, honestly, and how to persuade people. I remember I had that on my shelf for many years at the office, and sometimes I would leave it on my desk on purpose, sort of facing out with the title, and people would look and go, "Oh, are you going to use that on me?" And I would be like, "I've been using that on you for 10 years." So wonderful text. So awareness, liking, affinity, and then towards trust. This person is an authority figure. I believe what they're saying. They're an expert. And then moving past that phase, curiosity. I wonder what it would be like to work with this person. I want to have a chat with them. I want to understand the advice they give. Maybe they could be on my committee. And then intent. I want to work with them. I want to hire them. I want them on my project. Think of yourself in that flow. To go back to the question, I'm terrible at self-promotion. It works with clients. It works with colleagues. You put yourself in that flow as a product. And I would, as a practical step for this one, track your relationships with clients and colleagues. Where are you on this stepwise approach for each one of these people? Have you changed roles? I remember when I was at Pfizer, people would change roles all the time, and I would have a mental model of what they did, and I was wrong. Yeah, sure. The book again is called Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. It's a great book. It's a little bit older, but definitely stands the test of time. Thank you for asking. So see in this flow where, like, it's a little bit structured, but that's the way to get out of your head with this stuff. Where is this client in this flow? Are they aware of what I do? Maybe I changed my practice a bit. Maybe I bolted on a new element of my practice. Do they know that? How can I share that with them? That's not self-promotion. It's just making sure that the people that you have in your universe are aware of what you're doing. Are they aware I've built a new skill set? Maybe that would add to the trust factor, the authority factor. So see where they are in the flow. And then the flip side is, again, a lot of it, we are in a service industry, in a service profession. Stop making it about you. How can I make their time in this part of the flow more valuable? for them, not for me. So can I share information with them? What's useful for them? What constraints prevent them from moving to the next phase? To think about it in that way. So for all of your clients and your colleagues that you're thinking about that, see where they are in that flow. How can you move them to the next phase? All right, next question. I knew I was going to get one about AI. AI is supposedly going to eat legal work. Should junior lawyers be worried about their career trajectory, or is that just hype? I think the first part of the question is the tough one. I'll give you a little quick story. It's tax time, of course. So I spent a bazillion hours gathering up all my documents and sending them into an accountant. And every year I get a new fresh-faced young associate at the accountant firm contact me with, preliminary questions before the partner gets to it or whatever, which is good, good using the associates. And this year the person calls me and says, we received a bunch of receipts for business expenses. I'm in a new business, yay, much more complicated taxes. And do you have a summary document? Did you make a summary document? And I'm like, I was honest, maybe I was having a rough day, but I said, I know there's free AI tools that you could shove all those documents into and it'll produce in 5 seconds a summary. This is not a valuable call. So it sort of somewhat annoyed me. So to think about like, what is AI going to do? Let's start with like what you want to avoid. You cannot be behind the curve on this. Maybe it's hard to imagine that it's going to completely replace you or how you're going to use it in the future. But at a very minimum, let's not make it about you. Let's think about it from the client perspective. I think a better question is, what do my clients wish for? And not necessarily like what's a realistic expectation today, but what are they going to be thinking about for the future? And a good question would be, can I learn faster than them? Can I learn more than them? Can I always be ahead of the curve with them? I would propose you move beyond the productivity stuff. Like, it helped me draft a better email. Like, that's not bad, but and I'm still not there yet. I'm trying to think about how can I use AI in the substantive form, in the substance, in addition to productivity. Productivity, of course, is, if you can spend 15 minutes instead of an hour, if you don't have to call your accounting client to ask them for a summary, good. But I would think about, how do we move from productivity to substance? Can I show them like what the future might hold while at the same time still showing a lot of value in the present? And the one thing I'll call out here too, as an aside, we're obviously in a transition phase. Like, I remember, I'm old enough to remember I got my first email address when I was in university, and there was a phase where it's like, okay, faxes are on the way out, emails on the way in. And there was a period where not everybody was using just email. There was a mix and carrier pigeons or whatever at that point. So I remember transition phases when you're in an organization are amazing moments. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. For legal, like Thanos, inevitable. Agreed. There's so much out. This is a whole discussion too, and there's lots here. But I would take advantage of a transition phase, like whether you're in a reorg, whether there's a giant project, everything's changing. Transitions are when, winners look at transitions and say, how do I help my clients in this moment? How do I advance my own career in this moment? So my practical step, it's a little silly, but I find it useful. Usually in the legal profession, whether you're in-house or at an organization or obviously at a law firm, there are legitimate constraints to how we can use AI and input information, use the outputs and all that stuff. And it's legitimate, and that's a different discussion. But I would remove that barrier by playing around with your favorite tools or tools that you are just learning at home. And to me, that was a bit of a breakthrough where I've used, and play different ones. Just find your, this week use X and next week use Y. See what works. See if you can get past, the productivity questions. How can it help you in substance? Play around at home. And I think that does two things. One, you'll get used to different platforms. You'll get used to like what's good from one versus the other. But it'll also remove like the constraint factor when you're working on it at work. Like, okay, I can't do that. I can't do this. How can I do that? It's greenhousing, right? You just protect the seeds as they're growing. You let the light in. You don't start trimming things down as they're growing. Just leave them grow. I would greenhouse yourself at home, play around with the AI, and when you go to work, you'll just, number one, be more comfortable. Number two, know what questions to ask yourself as you're working through it. So I think, like the comment says in the chat, like it's inevitable that certain parts. I remember when I was a young lawyer, the thing I was best at was like research in the library or on on the internet a little bit, and I always showed up in court with that case from 100 years ago that opposing counsel did not find, and it was like a slam dunk. I would not be hired anymore. So you got to move it to the next level. It doesn't mean I've been replaced yet, but you got to shift your skills. All right, next question, close to my heart. When is the right time to move from law firm to in-house? How do I know if I'm making the move for the right reasons? I'm going to pause because there is a question. What AI tools do you like the most? Same question to the other folks in the chat. Yeah, thank you. Please feel free to answer in the chat. I have, I like everybody else in the universe, I began with ChatGPT. I'm allergic to it now. I don't know. It's I don't like the way I've tried to sort of change the way it interacts with me, but then I moved to played around with Gemini, but I've also, I think like 50% of the people out there now who are talking about this, I've really gotten into using Claude. I find it's giving me sort of like work product that is of a different level, but I'm definitely not the expert on which tools. I'm sure there's some people, as you said in here, that could add to it. But from a basic user-friendly things that are available to the general public, there's a few of those. Harvey, exactly, for the legal professionals, absolutely. And that from these answers, you could do your own research and demand of your organization. Like, are we exploring these tools? I'd like to try this. I'd like a pilot. Can we get a few licenses? Play around at home with things you like. Again, it's not necessarily the what, but it's the moment. It's a transition moment. And I think if what you're doing is waiting for the transition to be settled, okay, there's 20 different tools out there. I'll just wait till people figure out what's the best one, and I'll use that one. Well, then you're not part of the decision-making process. You're not inputting into how it goes. And I would suggest you've missed an opportunity. All right, excellent. Feel free to add to that answer in the chat. All right, when is the right time to move from a law firm to in-house? So I'll just, full disclosure, I did that. And it was right for me. It's obviously not right for everyone. And the reverse happens too, and to government as well. I don't want to miss that. I would start with like what I would propose might be the wrong reasons. And they're kind of the surface level obvious ones. You're exhausted. The partner you work with is impossible. In-house looks like the soft landing. Spoiler, it's not. I think, I would start to think about what the right reasons are is you want to own outcomes. You want to sit inside a business. You want to be accountable for something beyond the file. And the timing question is less important than the motivation, I would think. That being said, there is a downside on the timing if you wait a bit too long. It can be mitigated, but the downside, in my opinion, is the longer you spend in one environment, in-house or firm or another versus another, the longer you spend when you move, there are honestly a lot of things you need to unlearn because there are some behaviors and approaches that are just simply counterproductive and not useful versus another environment, which can be, easily unlearned early. It's like teaching kids, another language that's easier, but once you're hardened into the future, it's a lot more difficult. As a result, the mitigation I'll propose is something I call, and those of you who know me would know this, is what I call the chess rule. I'm a chess fan, and when you play chess, for those of you who play, if you make a move that puts your opponent in like a dilemma where they have to decide one thing, like, okay, how do I counter that? Okay, that's fine, but it'll be a draw, like it'll be back and forth. If you make a move where the opponent has two or three, they're on the horns of a dilemma, there's two or three things they have to choose between, you'll eventually win, like you'll whittle them down. So the idea is one move has multiple impacts. So from a professional career idea, I'm not a big fan of like, okay, I want to do 3 actions. So that means 3 hours, it's cumulative. And now I'm there at night, developing myself, growing. I'm a big fan of choosing actions that have multiple impacts. So it's a high return on your professional actions and your growth. So to apply it to this situation, if you're thinking just generally, I'm not sure I'm going to be here forever. Maybe I'm even enjoying what I'm doing, but I want to know what my career options are going to be. My suggestion is when you're working on things, like always be thinking about, is this particular action I'm taking on a file and a matter, working with people, what multiple benefits am I getting from it? Are there small adjustments in the actions I can take that would multiply that growth? Practical examples like, okay, I'm going to be on a committee and there's going to be a presentation, and you're going to be there for an hour, no matter what. And it's either you're sitting in a chair or you're the one standing up presenting the thing to a client, to a management team. Why not use that hour more effectively? So the chess rule, I think I've talked it through. And I would add to one thing, I got advice, from a great mentor years ago, David Allgood, the former GC for Royal Bank. And I remember he told me, in your career, it's interesting to experience sort of the triangle of organizations, the in-house, law firm, government. Then his advice was, over the course of your career, if you can, have at least 2 of those, and even 3 to rotate between. And, I thought that was so interesting. And we talked about that. And each experience gives you something different. Do you have to completely upend your life and change careers? Maybe, but you can always, there's always a smaller version of that. For the people thinking about moving, I would do it mentally, gradually, in terms of what would it be like to, work in-house. And you don't have to do a secondment for that. You can think about speaking with your clients in a different way, which actually is going to help your work with them. So if you think, I would love to know what it's like to work at company XYZ. Well, why don't you have more in-depth conversations with your clients about, well, what's on your mind every day? When I give you advice, how do you use it? By the way, I have to tell you, in 18 years that I worked in-house, I got forms of that question, but I never got an outright, remember that memo we gave you on that big issue? How did you deliver it to your clients? Yeah, great. Hold on, I'll get to that comment. So how would you deliver, how would you deliver that to your in-house clients? And then steep in that for a moment. That's what it's like to be in-house for that moment. All right, comment in the chat. Quite a bit opposite. Just moved back from back to a law firm. Yes, after some time working in-house. Lots of things to learn. Do you have any advice for junior lawyers in the early years of career to make their best time and energy to thrive? Yeah, thank you for that. And it's absolutely true. You're not the only person who does that. So if I look at the overall, like the profiles of the, what's necessary for those roles, they're a little bit on the very surface level, they're a little bit opposite. Like in-house counsel have to know a little bit about everything. Like you have to understand the whole business. And if you don't, you're not there yet, and that's fine. And then at a firm, you're expected somewhat to be doing the opposite, to know a lot about the few things that your clients reach out to you for. And that was a huge aha moment for me when I moved from a firm to in-house. Was I thought I understood my clients, because I went to one of my clients. I thought I understood their business very well. And it was like, I understood when I joined, they were only telling me what I needed to know to answer the question given to me. But that's somewhat dangerous, because they're deciding what I need to know to answer the question. In a perfect world, you'd have a Matrix-like Keanu Reeves moment where Kung Fu all of a sudden, and everything about your client so that you can give a very contextualized answer. So I think if your question is, I've moved from in-house to the firm, on the one hand, you have the challenge. If I did that now, I'd be in real trouble, because my substantive legal knowledge slowly erodes in favor of maybe people-oriented skills, hopefully. But depending on how long you've been gone, I would hold on to that mentality from in-house, where context is everything, and the what matters to the business. So now, yes, you're going to have, I think, this steepish, depending on how long it's been, hill of learning the substantive law that you're going to be practicing. That can be done. You did it once, you'll do it again. But I would never, ever lose the context you had in-house of, that'll make you an even better lawyer, of asking your clients, more questions. I would call with a higher ROQ, a return on question, like a deep question to understand their business. So you're in a nice position. And you know what? Flip your question around. Your firm has brought you in because you have that in-house experience. Share with your colleagues, oh, as a client, what I wanted was X. Like, you are now in a position to help. So that's something you can, in the lawyer to leader journey, you're bringing something to the table. All right. Thank you for that question. I'm going to switch to the next one. As an in-house lawyer, how do I prove my value to the business when I'm a cost center, not a revenue generator? Yeah. All right. Well, first of all, I would just start with stop trying to prove you're not a cost center. That is a losing argument. Now, there's you could probably do it, but that is not where I would put the center of mass of the attack in your argument. I would shift the thinking to start acting like a business partner. And businesses are willing to pay for things. So if you're an effective business partner, it's an entirely different posture when you think of it that way. And the one thing I would focus on, as in all things career development, we all have our shortcomings, our weaknesses. I've got so many that I'm hiding. But what I would propose is always to lean into your strengths. Like, what are your strengths? Take your 2 or 3 strengths and just power through those, and think about that. And in-house, a strength is legal has something that almost nobody else has: horizontal visibility across the whole organization. And that in-house it is somewhat true for a lot of functions, HR especially. From my healthcare experience, regulatory, medical, there's functions that support the whole business. They can have visibility to all of it, but they're not going to be effective if they deep dive into everything. They need to focus on what matters for their function. And legal, I think, is in a unique situation where anything in those areas can turn into a legal issue, and they often do. So why not lean into, I am at the center of that. So what does that mean? That means you're a hub. You're potentially a hub. You can connect the dots. You can flag issues to the organization that other people are not going to see. I'll give you the example. When I was managing teams in South America that had very little connection to the Canadian organization, I made it a point to always share with my Canadian CEO what the Brazilian CEO was facing and what their business review, from the senior managers were asking them, so that when she got to do her, a business review, she had that foresight. There was nobody else on the management team that had those responsibilities, those seemingly disconnected responsibilities. So I viewed myself as the hub that could bring in that information. So, and when you bring, a recommendation to these leaders or clients, don't just make a list of risks. The GCs that get a seat at the table are the ones that are making the business better, not defending your own existence. There's part of that. You need to battle for your budget sometimes, but start at least at the core of how can I make the business better. And I would propose like a radical goal, something that I always would strive for and enjoyed. And thank you. I see there's a thought I'll get to in a second. Was to advise yourself out of a job. Meaning, with every interaction with your client, my goal was always to make them a more sophisticated consumer of legal advice, to make them better risk takers, thoughtful risk takers, so that eventually they're making the decisions that we might make together more on their own. And in business, one of the key factors to succeed is speed. So if you are slowing things down, in addition to being a cost, that's not going so well. Of course, sometimes you need to put a little bit of brakes on the foot on the brake a little bit. But overall, I always like to give back. Like, if I had to slow them down here because it was a big issue, can I just completely release them here because it's generally an area that I'm comfortable them being in? So over time, in theory, your advice diminishes in the sense that they're off on their own, doing a good job on their own. So the practical next step on this one, in my view, is at your next business meeting, come with an observation about the business that has nothing to do with legal risk, but is a meaningful observation. It's not something superficial. So that means you got to be doing some observing before you get to this step, and then just raise it and see how the room reacts. All right, comment. Additional thoughts. Thank you. Show them how much money and time you save the company. Yeah, by doing the work in-house instead of hiring counsel. Absolutely. Metrics like that go unseen. You need to raise them. It's not time to be humble. Absolutely. Two, if you like business development, or even if you don't, try to introduce the company to potential new customers and partners. Yeah, absolutely. I did a lot of that with business development. Like, guess what? Law firms have a lot of connections with people who want to do deals. So I would connect our business development people to lawyers, and you, again, your role is a hub. And on the showing how much time and money you save the company, we're in a tough profession sometimes where when nothing happens, when it's quiet, thank you. We did our job. When nothing happens, you've done your job. Good luck, like promoting that. So how do you show the business that what didn't happen was because of things you've protected against? So to think about it in a little bit of a different way. Great comment. And then we're starting to be more data-driven department. Yeah, data. Your businesses function. I'll just open an aside. You need to know the language of money. You need to know finance terminology, finance concepts. These organizations are driven by data and driven by revenue and shareholder, demand and all that stuff. But if you can make your case that's data driven, you have a much, much better chance. That being said, do not forget, and I'm sorry to go back to the one book, but a lot of human decisions is not necessarily based on data. So don't forget the emotional part and the influence factors. Who is influencing the decision? So absolutely. All right. I will move on to the next question. What is the most undervalued skill in the legal market right now? There's obviously many answers to that, but mine would be judgment, not necessarily legal judgment. Of course, that's important, but human judgment. Knowing when to push, knowing when to let go, knowing when the client needs a lawyer and when they just need someone to think out loud with for 20 minutes. I remember years ago, I had a strategy related to when I was at Pfizer, related to Viagra, our famous drug that we used to have. And I had a legal strategy that I know would work. I like 100%. I knew would work. It would probably be like a first time that this type of strategy would be used. And I was super like keen and excited, young lawyer with a great idea, dog with a bone. I kept hitting, the wall from people that didn't want to try it. And I wasn't understanding it, and it had nothing to do with the probability of success. It just had to do with other factors that I was just blind to. And it's because I didn't take the time to really understand the interests of the people involved, the interests of the organizations involved, and how those things would work. It's not always, or if ever, just about probability of success and will this work and what's the legal answer. So I always begin with like the strict legal answer, and then you shelve that and you go into like, okay, what are the human beings around the table thinking? That's not necessarily like, some lawyers are excellent at that, and some, it just takes practice. This is where the small things, and we did lose a bit of that during COVID when everyone was in their basement, of the human interaction and getting to know, does that flip of the eyebrow mean this thing is dead? Why are those two people in the meeting talking separately? What's their connection to the issue? Where are their interests? Who holds the budget? The vast majority of decisions will factor in your legal advice. It's rare that it's determinative. So you need to know like all those other factors. So knowing when the answer, for example, knowing when the answer is yes, technically, but here's why you probably should not. So, the technical yes versus what are the actual risks. And the market's full of lawyers who can analyze, but it's probably genuinely short of lawyers who can help with that actual contextual decision. And that's really where there's a gap that a lot of careers are made. Like if you can bridge that gap, there's not a lot of training for that, but it's just human observation. And having lunch with people, having coffee with people, not necessarily to develop business, but to develop a relationship and to understand what makes this person tick and why they are not doing something or doing something is super valuable. So my practical next step on that one is, next time you see someone, he's asking for a legal opinion, give them your recommendation first. I see a lot of times like there's almost like a justification where we get the analysis first. Was like, here's why I'm going to tell you something. It's not a mystery novel. Begin with your recommendation. And it's entirely possible, a little secret, they don't read anymore. If they trust you, and they view this thing in a particular band of risk, and they have a busy day, they may take you on face value with the beginning. So you don't want them searching for the answer. You might feel uncomfortable doing it that way. Highly recommended. Just do it anyways. All right. Next question. Oh, I like this one. What is the one thing outside counsel does that secretly drives general counsels or in-house counsel crazy, but they never tell them directly? I am positive half the people on this call have answers to that. Let's see. I could probably give you a list. I won't do that, but maybe I'll just start. Actually, even in the question, why not ask that question of your clients? Is there? And I'll just zero in for a second on feedback. One form of feedback request for feedback is, I'll give you an example. You're on stage, you give a presentation, get off the stage, you meet someone on your team, and you say, "How was I?" Well, my God, what are they going to say? Like, they're going to say, "That was great, well done." Not useful. That's empty praise, and it's your fault. You didn't ask a good question. A better question, and this is from, I'm not going to take credit for this. I stole this from our colleague Karine Grand-Maison years ago, and she would always ask me, "What's one thing I could have done differently?" So first of all, you're nailed at that point. You're in a corner. What's one thing I could have done differently? First of all, it's one thing. I can come up with one thing. And it wasn't done better, or what's one thing I screwed up. It's one thing I could have done differently. And I would propose that is going to generate a lot of interesting answers. And I don't think in all the years I practiced, I had a lot of firms asking me that, like, what's one thing I could have done differently? I can go through a little bit of a list, over lawyering it. There's a lot of that. So with this framing in mind, ask in advance, both when you begin a relationship and even maybe when you're beginning a large file or even partway through a large file, ask about resourcing. How do you want this resource? The answer might come back and it could be unrealistic because in-house counsel don't necessarily understand what needs to be done on these big files. So that's up to you to say, "Oh, ho, that's a data point. They don't understand what we're delivering and how we're delivering it." So that's a data point. So then you could say, "Well, actually, we need this, we need that person." So ask resourcing. How about if your client asks you a question and you're thinking, "Ooh, that's not even the right question," you should not be hesitating to reframe it and say, "Well, we can get to that, but I might actually think that this question is going to unlock that even more." Like, you should be challenging your clients a little bit so that they can help. They're not the experts in the subject matter. They're sort of going through it in the 5 minutes they have to look at the issue and then moving on. Billing stupid stuff. Yeah, that's thank you for that comment. Yeah. Here's when I was talking about like when's the right time to go in-house, if that's what you're maybe interested, and I said part of the thought process or thought exercise is to put yourself in your client's shoes as you're interacting. On the billing question, put yourself in your client's shoes, reread the bill not from the perspective of, "We worked hard, this was legitimate, and it deserves to be billed." That may be true. Put that aside for a minute and sit on the other side. How will this be received? Does this feel like something that someone would want to pay top dollar for? Maybe there's all sorts of ways of managing it. It could be you bill it and you have a conversation. It could be you don't bill it and you have a conversation. It could be, "You know what, we did that work, but maybe we should have. I think that you have resources in-house. Can we talk about what between you as a team, in-house and law firm, you're not against each other, you're a team. You have effectively shared resources. Why not have a conversation to say, 'Hey, I was going to bill you this. We did the work, but you know what? I think you have someone, paralegal, that actually could do that quite well. What do you think about next time?'" Have that conversation. So yeah, I hear you on the billing stupid stuff. And try to make it a productive conversation. And maybe I'll add to that the famous one of like the written communication, the memo when it could have been a phone call. I just as an experience I've had working at a large organization, when I was a more junior, I would have the senior people in the organization or clients like drop by my office constantly. And I started to regret going in-house. I'm like, I have no shield. I have no, like, I'm not in the 17th floor of an office downtown and they can find me, in the bathroom on my way or the way to the cafeteria. It was scary. But what I noticed was the most senior people were the ones who never emailed. They just showed up. And at first I thought it was annoying. And then as I started to get more experience in the organization, I understood why, because they really are just thinking about 4 or 5 critical things every day. They're not thinking about 17,000 things. They're on the 4 or 5 critical things, and they want to get a good, deep, solid answer on it. And they want to build relationships with people to get those answers. Relationships are not built by email. Each communication you have is an opportunity to further the relationship. Certainly, you don't want to bombard your client with calls all the time, but you need to, I think, have a diverse flow of information, calls, emails, memos, all that thing. And then my last thought, and I'll get to the comment first. Recommending the safest legal answer. Yeah. Even when commercially unrealistic. Absolutely. Like, again, to go back to the ask point, understand your client's risk tolerance. That's the 2 things that are going to be a huge filter for for the organizations, how they use your advice. Risk tolerance and the culture and purpose of the organization. For a healthcare organization, the purpose is patients. I would have a filter of like, is this right for patients? That's it. And then our risk tolerance in certain areas was super high. Like if someone is in need of a cancer medication and they're going to die next week, I'm going to take a legal risk on advertising to help this person. But if it's in another area where, maybe it's more mundane commercial stuff, maybe I don't want to risk certain things. I don't want to risk our reputation. So yeah, conservative advice, although it feels, think of it driving on the highway, like certainly driving 50 over the speed limit, not for me. But you ever run into the person that's also going 30 under the speed limit? That's really dangerous. It's unexpected. So overly conservative advice actually doesn't move the business. It's not a good use of time. It harms the relationship. Have a conversation. And maybe it just needs to be a conversation about, hey, listen, our risk tolerance is higher than that. Give me option B that maybe makes you a bit uncomfortable, but I'm willing to consider. So totally agree. So anyways, the practical next step is obviously ask. All right. I'm conscious of the time. We've got 4 minutes left. Why don't I take a crack at one more question? Unless if I see one in the chat, I'll prioritize that. Yeah, I had this question just the other day sent to me. New equity partner. Someone just became an equity partner and they're at a firm and they're asking, what's next? And I can pull back and maybe speak about this more generally too, in the sense of like, when you accomplish a goal that you've been trying to do for many years, whether it be to get that role at the firm after you're an articling student, to move in-house, to get promoted, whatever it is. So we'll use that as the example. There's a moment in time where you've poured everything into this one goal and your brain is locked on it, for years. And there becomes like an arrival fallacy where, I would call it like the morning after the finish line. You've gotten over the finish line, and it's like what many of us do, and I'm just as guilty, is you don't pause to reflect on that milestone, enjoy it, have that glass of whatever you would normally do. And I don't mean that just that night, but just, over a certain period of time. Many of us immediately move into the what's next. There's no pause, there's no acknowledgement. And your brain is normalizing that it's, you get past a line and you go, you pass a line and you go. And it's not reflecting like a lack of progress. It's a lack of recognition of your own progress. So I would, those 2 things are different problems and there's different solutions to that. So I would propose, like in this example, you become a partner and then you start thinking what's next. You've thought about your own track for a while. You've focused on how can I, develop a book of business? How can I, and once you start doing that as a younger partner, even more so, maybe flip it around. Now it's time to think about the firm and the other people and it's the same at an organization. You get promoted to a senior role. Maybe you poured yourself into a lot of it. You did the, relentless patience. Flip it around. It's time to maybe think about developing other people, shaping the culture of the organization, building something that outlasts your, best billing year. You're going from performer to architect, and helping build an environment where great work can happen. So the practical tip for me is like, just block an hour this week, no agenda other than this question. And what do I want to build for the future that outlasts, me as an individual? I always find that a good leadership exercise, no matter where you are. All right. I'm going to be wrapping up. I really appreciated the questions. I will leave it open for a second if anybody has anything else they wanted to add, to ask. As I mentioned at the beginning, I will put my answers to questions I didn't get to. I'll put that up again. There we go. Yeah. So if you want to see the blog I'll have with answers to the remaining questions. Also, I'll just add, and I was putting the right one for a second. If you're interested in learning more, you can take a free leadership assessment on my website. It's 5 questions. It'll take you 3 minutes, and it'll give you a sense of where you are in this track for some of the conversations that we've just had. And happy to talk with anyone who wants to reach out and send me some feedback. There you go. What's one thing I could have done differently? You can, whether you put it in the chat and humiliate me publicly, or whether you want to send it to me directly, no problem. I am a feedback receiving machine. I find that's the best way to grow. So I want to thank you for taking the time to attend this. I know all of you are busy people. Thank you for the quality of the questions, the engagement. It was really, hope it was useful for you. So thank you very, very much. Thank you.